There comes a moment in life when the noise dies, the crowd fades, and you are left with nothing but yourself. And it's in that silence, uncomfortable, raw, and terrifying, that you discover who you really are. Most people run from that moment. They bury themselves in distractions, in people, in chaos, because the truth of their own soul feels too heavy. But listen, if you can learn to love being alone, you unlock a power that no one can touch. Loneliness is not weakness. It is the forge where strength is built. The world wants you dependent, constantly seeking validation, needing someone to make you feel whole. But when you master solitude, you realize you are already whole. Your mind sharpens, your discipline strengthens, and your purpose becomes undeniable. Sitting alone in silence becomes a weapon. It's where you plan, where you heal, where you create the unbreakable version of yourself. Don't fear being alone. Embrace it. Because once you can sit in a room with no one but yourself and feel unstoppable, no enemy, no betrayal, no loss can ever break you. The man who conquers solitude conquers everything. Solitude builds mental strength, but most people don't even give themselves the chance to find out. The moment they're left alone, they panic. They reach for their phones, they call a friend, they turn on the TV, anything to drown out the silence. They think silence is emptiness, but in reality, silence is the arena where true strength is created. When you are alone, there's no one clapping for you, no one praising you, no one holding your hand. It's just you and the thoughts inside your head. That's the battlefield. And if you can win there, you can win anywhere. Because the truth is, life isn't about how loud you can be in the crowd. It's about how powerful you can remain in the quiet. When you force yourself into solitude, when you sit down with no distractions, your mind begins to attack you. It throws doubts, fears, regrets, and insecurities right in your face. Most people run from that storm. But the strong learn to face it. They let those thoughts come, and instead of collapsing, they fight back. Every time you overcome the voice that tells you you're not enough, every time you ignore the urge to give up, every time you face the uncomfortable silence without needing escape, you're sharpening your mental blade. That's what solitude does. It builds a mind so powerful that when the world tries to crush you, you already know how to stand tall. Solitude is not about being lonely. It's about being disciplined enough to build strength where others collapse. Think of the greatest warriors, the greatest leaders, the greatest creators. None of them became who they were by constantly being surrounded by people. They became who they were because they spent long nights in isolation, training, reading, writing, thinking, suffering, and growing. Alone is where plans are made. Alone is where discipline is forged. Alone is where you stare your weaknesses in the eye and decide you're stronger than them. Most people confuse solitude with punishment. They think being left alone is a sign of failure, rejection, or abandonment. But solitude is not a prison. It's a training ground. It's the gym for your mind, just like lifting weights. Tears your muscles so they grow back stronger. Solitude tears down your illusions so your mind grows back sharper. It strips away fake friends, fake validation, fake confidence, and leaves you with the truth. And yes, the truth is heavy. It's painful to realize you have to change, that you're not where you want to be, that you have flaws no one else can fix for you. But once you stop running and face it, that's when you become unstoppable. Imagine the difference between a person who can't handle a single quiet night alone and a person who thrives in it. One is always seeking comfort, needing attention, and folding when life gets tough. The other is calm, centered, and dangerous in the best way. Because solitude has taught them patience. Solitude has taught them focus. Solitude has taught them that they don't need anyone else to survive, to create, to conquer. That's mental strength. That's what gives you the edge in a world full of weak minds addicted to noise. The mind that is trained in solitude does not break when rejected. It does not crumble when betrayed. It does not fall apart when life doesn't go according to plan. Instead, it adapts. It endures. It grows. Because solitude has already tested it. Solitude has already shown it the worst storms, the darkest nights, the harshest doubts, and it survived. That's why you can tell the difference between someone who runs from silence and someone who embraces it. One collapses under pressure. The other thrives in it. If you want mental strength, you must stop treating solitude like your enemy. Make it your ally. Train with it the way a fighter trains with pain. Sit alone. Turn off the distractions. Listen to the thoughts you're afraid of. Write them down. Face them and then defeat them. Over time, you'll realize you don't fear being alone anymore. You crave it because it's in that solitude that you build the weapons you'll carry into the battles of life. The world is full of people who are physically present but mentally broken. They smile in public but collapse in private. They act strong when surrounded by others, but when they're left alone, they drown in their own minds. Don't be one of them. Train your solitude. Build a mind that doesn't need the applause, doesn't need the noise, doesn't need constant validation. Build a mind that is strong enough to sit in silence and still roar inside. When you master solitude, you don't just build mental strength. You build freedom. You're free from the chains of dependency, free from the weakness of needing others to define you, free from the fear of silence. You walk into the world knowing that even if everything collapses, even if everyone leaves, even if you lose it all, you'll be fine. Because you've trained in solitude. You've built the strongest weapon a person can own, an unbreakable mind. That is why solitude builds mental strength. It's not about isolation for the sake of suffering. It's about embracing the challenge that most people avoid. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need external support to stand tall. And once you reach that level, once you realize solitude is the source of your power, you'll understand why the strongest, most disciplined, most unstoppable people in history all had one thing in common. They mastered being alone. Dependency destroys growth, and yet most people live their entire lives chained to it. They depend on the approval of their friends, the validation of strangers, the comfort of their family, or the constant distraction of technology just to feel alive. They tell themselves they're living free, but in reality, they're trapped in invisible cages. The greatest tragedy is that they never realize those cages were built by their own dependence. They lean on others for strength, for purpose, for happiness, and in doing so, they never discover the force of their own power. You cannot grow if you are always leaning. You cannot rise if you are always waiting for someone else to carry you. Growth demands independence. It demands standing on your own feet even when the ground feels like it's shaking. The moment you depend on someone else to keep you motivated, you've already lost. Because what happens when they leave? What happens when the applause stops? When the people you trusted walk away? When the support system you've leaned on your whole life collapses? That is when most people crumble because their strength was never truly theirs. It was borrowed. And borrowed strength is weakness disguised as comfort. True growth begins the moment you say, I will not rely on anyone else to carry me through the fire. That doesn't mean rejecting help, but it means building yourself to a point where even if help never comes, you still rise. Dependency is seductive because it feels safe. It feels easy. Someone else makes the choices. Someone else takes the risks. Someone else carries the weight. But what is easy will never make you strong. The reason so many people never grow into the warriors they were meant to be is because they stay addicted to that safety. They want someone to tell them it's okay. They want someone to lift them when they're weak. They want someone to provide certainty in an uncertain world. And that constant leaning leaves them fragile. A strong person isn't the one who has never been hurt. It's the one who has been alone, beaten, betrayed, and still learned how to fight without waiting for rescue. Dependency is also dangerous because it teaches you to compromise your values for comfort. How many people stay in toxic relationships because they're afraid to be alone? How many remain in jobs they hate because they're dependent on a paycheck, too afraid to build something greater? How many stay trapped in the opinions of others because they're dependent on validation? That's not living. That's slavery. And you can never grow while you're chained. Growth demands breaking those chains, even when it hurts, even when it scares you. Growth means saying, I'd rather walk the hard road alone than the easy road as a prisoner. Think about the strongest trees. They grow tall not because someone watered them every day, not because the soil was always perfect, but because they endured storms, droughts, and winds that tried to break them. Their roots dug deeper because no one was coming to save them. That's how human beings grow as well. Every time you refuse to depend, every time you force yourself to figure it out instead of begging for rescue, every time you take responsibility for your own survival, your roots grow stronger, your mind toughens, your spirit sharpens. That is the price of independence, and it is also the reward. People confuse support with dependency. Support is useful. It's fuel when you're already running. But dependency is dangerous. It's relying on fuel just to start moving. If your growth depends on someone always being there, you're not growing, you're just coasting. And one day when life takes that person away, you'll realize you were never truly strong. Independence means you build the ability to stand regardless of who's watching, regardless of who's clapping, regardless of who's carrying you. It's knowing that if everyone disappeared tomorrow, you would still be standing. Dependency also kills potential because it blinds you to your own capabilities. You'll never know how far you can run if you're always waiting for someone to run beside you. You'll never know how strong you are if you keep handing your burdens to others. You'll never know how sharp your mind can become if you keep asking others to think for you. Growth is hidden inside struggle, and when you depend, you rob yourself of that struggle. You rob yourself of the very pain that would make you powerful. When you break free from dependency, you stop asking permission. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop looking for approval. You start acting. You start moving. You start creating. You start becoming. Growth doesn't happen when you're safe. It happens when you're exposed. And nothing exposes you more than independence. When you have no one to blame, no one to lean on, no one to rescue you, that's when you finally meet the real version of yourself. Dependency destroys growth because it convinces you that you're incapable without others. But independence proves that you were capable all along. The man or woman who learns to walk without support is dangerous, not because they hate help, but because they don't need it. They can lose everything and still rebuild. They can be abandoned and still rise. They can be betrayed and still move forward. That kind of strength is unshakable, and it's only found outside the cage of dependency. So break it. Break the chains of needing validation, needing applause, needing someone else to guide you. Build yourself into someone who can thrive alone. Once you do, you'll never fear loss again because you'll know that nothing and no one controls your growth. You do, and that realization will set you free. Silence is where clarity lives, yet most people are terrified of it. The world today is built on noise, constant chatter, endless notifications, flashing screens, and opinions thrown from every corner. People wake up to noise, they go to work surrounded by noise, and they fall asleep with noise playing in their ears. They never spend a moment truly in silence, and that's why they're confused, lost, and directionless. Clarity isn't found in chaos, it's found in the quiet space where your thoughts finally have room to breathe. The person who learns to embrace silence is the one who learns to see life with precision while everyone else stumbles blindly in distraction. Silence is uncomfortable because it exposes the truth. When the noise stops, you hear the voice of your own soul. You hear your doubts, your regrets, your dreams, and your fears. Most people can't handle that confrontation, so they drown it with sound. They would rather live in distraction than face the reality of who they are. But clarity only comes when you face that silence head on. It's in those quiet hours that your mind begins to sort the chaos, stripping away the nonsense, the lies, and the illusions until only the truth remains. And the truth is always simple, even when it's painful. Think about the most important decisions in life. Where you want to go, who you want to be, what kind of legacy you want to leave. Those answers don't come when you're scrolling through your phone, sitting in a crowd, or absorbing endless noise from the outside world. They come when you're alone in silence, when the world is muted and your mind can finally speak clearly. That's why the most powerful thinkers, leaders, and creators throughout history all understood the value of silence. They took time to step away from the crowd, to retreat into quiet, to let their minds process and uncover what others could not see. Silence is also the antidote to confusion. When you're overwhelmed, when you're pulled in 1,000 directions, when you don't know what choice to make, the worst thing you can do is add more noise. Yet that's what most people do. They ask more people for advice, they consume more information, they chase more distractions. All of it just clouds the mind further. Silence clears the fog. When you sit quietly, when you let your thoughts settle like dust in still air, suddenly the path becomes visible. The answers were always there. You just needed to remove the noise to see them. The problem is that silence requires patience. It doesn't reward you instantly like a distraction does. It demands you sit still. It demands you listen. It demands you endure discomfort. But that discomfort is exactly what sharpens the mind. Silence trains you to think deeply, to analyze, to understand not just what you feel, but why you feel it. And once you understand yourself, you understand the world better. Clarity is not just knowing what to do, it's knowing why you're doing it. That wisdom is born only in silence. Noise is easy, silence is hard. That's why the majority never find clarity. They jump from one distraction to the next, numbing themselves with entertainment, gossip, and constant stimulation. They wonder why they feel lost, why their lives lack direction, why they wake up each day without a sense of purpose. It's because they've never allowed silence to speak to them. They've silenced their own clarity with the voices of others. But if you can learn to love silence, if you can sit with it long enough, it will give you answers that no person, no book, no distraction ever could. In silence, your vision sharpens. You start to see what truly matters and what doesn't. The problems that felt overwhelming suddenly shrink. The goals that seem distant become clear steps. The relationships that drain you reveal themselves, and the ones that fuel you shine brighter. Silence is like a mirror. It reflects everything with brutal honesty. Some people run from that mirror because they don't like what they see, but the strong use it. They adjust, they grow, they build themselves into something greater. The irony is that silence is not empty. People think silence is nothingness, but in truth, it is full. It's full of answers, lessons, insights, and direction. It's in silence that your subconscious mind connects the dots, that creativity sparks, that your intuition whispers. All the great breakthroughs, all the great ideas, all the great transformations begin in a quiet moment when the mind is finally still enough to listen. The people who cannot sit in silence will never hear those whispers, and that is why they stay stuck in mediocrity. To master silence is to master yourself. If you can sit in a quiet room and not feel restless, if you can spend time without needing distraction, if you can let your mind breathe without fear, you've already separated yourself from most of the world. You've given yourself an advantage that can't be bought or faked. Because while others are drowning in noise, you are sharpening your vision. While they are chasing distraction, you are building clarity, and clarity is power. So seek silence, not as an escape, but as a tool. Use it to cut through the noise of the world, to see your life with precision, to strengthen your mind. Let silence become your teacher, your guide, your weapon. Because once you realize that silence is where clarity lives, you'll stop running from it and start craving it. And in that craving, you'll find the kind of focus, purpose, and strength that most people spend their entire lives searching for, but never find. Self-love is forged in isolation, not in the applause of the crowd, not in the validation of others, not in the temporary comfort of relationships or attention. It is built in the moments when you are alone, staring at yourself without filters, without distractions, without anyone there to tell you that you're enough. Those quiet moments are brutal because they strip away the masks. In isolation, you can't pretend. You can't perform. You can't hide behind noise. You are left with the raw truth of who you are, and that truth can be painful, but it is in facing that pain, in sitting with it and learning from it, that true self-love is born. Most people chase love in others because they have never learned to love themselves. They depend on someone else to make them feel valued, to make them feel beautiful, to make them feel strong. But that's not love. That's dependency wrapped in a pretty package. The second that external love is taken away, they collapse. That's because it was never theirs to begin with. Real self-love is not given to you. It's created by you. And it is forged in the silence of isolation when you are forced to meet the parts of yourself you've ignored, to heal wounds you've buried, and to build worth that cannot be taken away. Isolation forces you to confront your flaws. It puts a mirror in front of you and says, this is who you are when no one is watching. That confrontation is hard, and that's why so many people avoid it. They distract themselves with noise, with company, with constant busyness, because they don't want to face their insecurities. But the problem is, if you never face them, you never grow past them. True self-love doesn't come from pretending you're perfect. It comes from acknowledging your imperfections and choosing to love yourself anyway. And that choice only becomes possible when isolation strips away all the masks you wear for the world. In isolation, you begin to build a relationship with yourself. You learn how you think, how you feel, what you need, and what you want. Most people don't even know themselves deeply because they've never spent enough time in their own company. They think they're chasing happiness, but they don't even know what happiness means to them personally. They copy what others want. They imitate what others do. They absorb other people's dreams. That's why they're always unfulfilled. But when you sit in isolation long enough, you start to hear your own voice again. You start to separate your desires from the desires of the world. And when you begin to live according to that inner voice, you begin to love yourself authentically. Isolation also teaches you resilience. When you realize you can survive your own company, when you realize you can face the loneliness, the doubts, and the fears, and still come out alive, you begin to respect yourself. And respect is the foundation of love. You can't truly love yourself if you don't respect yourself. And you can't respect yourself if you're constantly running away from who you are, sitting in solitude, facing the silence, enduring the discomfort. Those are acts of courage. And courage always builds respect. Over time, that respect evolves into unshakable self-love because you've proven to yourself that you can endure, that you can survive, that you are enough on your own. The beauty of self-love forged in isolation is that it is unbreakable. When you build love for yourself through external sources, it can be taken away the moment those sources disappear. But when you build it in solitude, no one can touch it. Breakups can't destroy it. Rejection can't weaken it. Criticism can't shatter it. You've built your love for yourself in the toughest arena, your own mind, and because of that, it stands unshaken by the storms of the world. Some people fear isolation because they equate it with loneliness. But loneliness is the absence of others, while isolation is the presence of yourself. Loneliness drains you because you're craving someone else to fill a void. Isolation empowers you because you learn how to fill that void yourself. That shift is powerful. It takes you from being dependent on others for love to being complete in yourself. And when you are complete, you don't chase, you don't beg, you don't cling, you give love freely because you already have it within you. When you learn to love yourself in isolation, you also stop settling. You stop tolerating relationships that drain you. You stop accepting friendships that disrespect you. You stop bending your worth for the sake of approval because you know what you deserve. You've sat with yourself long enough to recognize your value, and you've built that value from the ground up. That kind of self-love makes you dangerous in the best way because it makes you unshakable. Isolation is not punishment. It is the forge. It is the fire that burns away the illusions, the noise, the dependency, and leaves behind the purest version of you. And in that purity, self-love is born. It may not be comfortable. It may not be easy, but it is real. And once you have it, no one can take it away from you. So embrace the isolation. Sit in the silence. Face the discomfort. Because in that space, in that fire, in that stillness, you will meet yourself. And once you learn to love that person fully and unapologetically, you'll never need to search for love outside yourself again. Mastering loneliness makes you unbreakable, but most people spend their entire lives running from it. They see loneliness as a curse, as proof that something is wrong with them, as if being without company means being without worth. That's why they cling to people who drain them, chase relationships that don't serve them, and settle for distractions that numb them. They'll do anything to avoid feeling alone. But here's the truth. Loneliness is not the enemy. It is the final test. It is the crucible where your character is burned and reshaped. If you can master loneliness, if you can sit in the emptiness and still rise, you develop a strength that no loss, no rejection, no betrayal can ever touch. Loneliness hurts because it forces you to face yourself without a shield. There's no comfort from a friend, no hand to hold, no noise to drown out your thoughts. It's just you. And that's why it feels unbearable for so many, because they've never built a relationship with themselves. They are strangers in their own skin. But if you can endure loneliness long enough, something incredible happens. You stop seeing it as a punishment and you start seeing it as a gift. You realize that loneliness is simply an invitation to build yourself into someone so strong, so grounded, that you are never truly alone again. Mastering loneliness doesn't mean rejecting connection. It doesn't mean isolating yourself forever or pretending you don't need people. It means that even if connection is taken away, even if you are left in silence, your foundation remains solid. Most people lean so heavily on others that when those people leave, they collapse. They define themselves by relationships, and when those relationships end, their identity shatters. But the one who has mastered loneliness cannot be broken this way, because they've already faced the abyss. They've already sat in the darkness and found light within themselves. And that light cannot be extinguished by anyone else. Think about how dangerous you become once you no longer fear loneliness. If rejection doesn't scare you, you take bigger risks. If abandonment doesn't destroy you, you love more freely without chains. If solitude doesn't break, you build, create, and grow with unstoppable focus. Most people live timidly because their greatest fear is being left behind. But when you master loneliness, that fear dies. And when fear dies, power is born. You no longer beg for love. You no longer chase attention. You no longer compromise your worth for companionship. You walk through life with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you can survive anything, even yourself. Loneliness, when mastered, becomes fuel. In those moments when the world feels empty, you learn to pour that energy into your goals, your health, your craft, your vision. You begin to realize that loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the presence of time. Time that most waste on noise, you get to use to sharpen your sword. That's why so many of history's greatest minds spent long stretches alone. They didn't fear loneliness. They transformed it into creation, into wisdom, into strength. They knew something most people don't. The man or woman who learns to thrive in loneliness becomes untouchable. Mastering loneliness also heals you from desperation. How many mistakes are made because people are afraid to be alone? They settle for relationships that destroy their peace. They surround themselves with fake friends. They compromise their values just to avoid the feeling of being lonely. But once you master it, you no longer need to settle. You stop choosing people out of fear, and you start choosing them out of strength. You no longer cling to those who don't deserve you because you know you are enough without them. That's when you attract relationships of real value, because they're no longer filling a void. They're adding to a life that is already whole. The irony is that once you master loneliness, you rarely feel lonely again, because you realize that loneliness is just an illusion. You are never truly alone. You always have yourself, your mind, your spirit, your vision. And when you know how to love and respect yourself, your own company becomes enough. That's when loneliness transforms from something you fear into something you embrace. It becomes your training ground, your sanctuary, your weapon. The world breaks most people because they fear being left with nothing. But when you've mastered loneliness, nothing is never something to fear,